You want to take us to our next one?
Yes, this is the Atlanta Hawks. So they are sending 25, 26 as a swap, and 27 first to San Antonio from the DeJounte Murray trade. They own the Lakers 25 first, which is unprotected, potentially juicy with some downside there. They own the Kings 25 first, thanks Kevin Huerter, with top 12 protection. Top 10 protection in 26, then 26 and 27. It turns into seconds in 26 and 27. That's hard to say if not conveyed. They own the 2027 first from Milwaukee or New Orleans, the least favorable of those, and that also has top 4 protection. So kind of the same question.
Dual bucket team, right?
What's that? Yeah, multi-bucket team. Multi-bucket. I mean, the obvious. Let's start with more immediate. Like, what do these various obligations and certainly the nearer ones sort of incentivize Atlanta to do and not do at the deadline? And I guess you can stretch that out for a couple seasons, really.
Do you think so? My gut reaction is, and I'm not saying for them to do something stupid, although I think they would also be another fun Jimmy Butler team. Just let me look. If you guys want chaos, put me in charge of an NBA franchise. Like, I will do things in markets that normally wouldn't do them, and I will make no apologies for it. My gut reaction is they should be not like super duper buyers, but just devalue your own picks moving forward as much as possible, like being as good as you can within reason. But when you start to look at their protections, or I'm sorry, the other picks that they're owed, Grant, it's sort of like, okay, could they view the Lakers 2025 first as a proxy for their own? They're like, how much more valuable is their first round pick to compare to the Lakers this year? And then could they also make the case that, I'm saying without doing anything, that Kings pick, like maybe it conveys this year, but like if it doesn't, okay, if you're going to get a top 10 protected Kings pick and you have to swap your own pick, does that cancel it out maybe if you're going to get a Kings pick in that season? So what I'm really looking at it is I'm saying, so could they view the Lakers pick this year as a substitute for their own? And then even the pick in 2027, where it's, I guess, Milwaukee or New Orleans, one of them could be really good, but it's loosely protected. Could they just look at this and say, okay, like we're out our own picks, but we still have picks in those years. And so we're just going to stay the course and stand pat, be mediocre. I don't know if does it also give them a license if they wanted to, and they won't. I want to be clear, but I also think it opens the door for someone like you, who in the past has argued they should just strip it down. They could technically go that route depending on how they feel about these other 3 first rounders that they have in their chamber.
Yeah, when I make the strip it down argument for them, which I'm like less and less convinced by the better they look, and the more I'm kind of like, oh, Atlanta's like looking pretty good.
It's the DeAndre Hunter effect.
He's got me. The argument I make is like, well, if you don't have your own picks, at least the next best thing is somebody else's, and like that's what they have. Like, you can just view the 2 incoming 25s, with protections, and that 27 as like, yeah, you just substitute those for the 3 picks that you still have going out to the Spurs, and you're like break even. I think my thought is you're sort of doubly incentivized to be a buyer talking about Atlanta, because there's no benefit to tanking, obviously, because your draft picks will not improve no matter how bad you are for basically 3 years. And then you can use these other picks that you don't really have control over in the same sense, because the success of these other teams determines how good they are, to trade for win now stuff. Because why wouldn't you be thinking win now when you don't have like your own picks and you don't benefit at all from being bad? So I think that's kind of not a great position to be in, because you do really surrender like a lot of control. But do you agree that what we're looking at on the screen here basically is an argument that the Hawks should be trying to go get somebody to make the team better? And that might be true this year and next year at the deadline.
I think I would lean that way as well, but I think they're also in a position where this is not a roster where it's completely bereft of players who theoretically could be in Atlanta and be good long term. So if you wanted to stand pat, I think that because you have these others where it's like, honestly, you could view what pick has more value. I think people would say the Hawks' 2025 first is more valuable than the Lakers' 2025 first.
Maybe.
We don't necessarily know that's the case.
Yeah. So I mean, the Lakers have the 12th best point differential in the West. Like it's just like regression is like screaming right now. Like LeBron and AD have been healthy. That 25 first, that could be a top 7 pick before this is all over. Who knows?
I do. When I look at them, I would say they're either going to be convinced or forced into being a medium size. Like they're not going to trade all of these picks. That's not going to like to go the home run swing.
Yeah.
But they're incentivized to maybe be a buyer. But I think for more than anything, what I think it does is it ruins the buyer's market because they're absolutely not going to be sellers. Like if anything, they're going to stay like in a normal. If they had their own picks, and yes, they've been better than I expected this year. But if they had their own picks, maybe even over the summer, they would have looked at moving Bogdanovich, DeAndre Hunter. And now it's like, well, maybe they'll move Clint Pella and Larry Nance Jr., but they're probably not going to move any of those other guys. And so if you were a buyer, but I know Bogdanovich hasn't been healthy or that good this year, but it's kind of taken at least one or two intriguing names off the board for other buyers because this team, whether you think they buy or stand pat, I would be flabbergasted if they sold.
Yeah, beyond Capella and Nance for sure, because those are like, well, that's a get something while you can kind of thing. But I agree. I think they're just not incentivized to sell, and they are a team that like normally you'd say like absolutely you could probably get a lot of stuff for Hunter, Bogdanovich, whatever. But that's just not that doesn't make sense for them.
And that'll be something to look back on after the deadline of if you think that it wasn't active enough. Because even if like the trades we've already seen, if Dennis Schroeder going to the Warriors or Dorian Finney-Smith going to Lakers ends up being like two of the three biggest deals we see during trade season, people will be bummed out. But then you have to go back and look, and it's just like, well, this type of situation with Atlanta where they're not terrible, they're not great, and yet they're not incentivized to try and be one or the other at this point. How does that just impact the trade market at large?
Yeah. We're on to the Oklahoma City Thunder, who I don't know. Do they have any picks? Yeah, they have too many.
By the way, I wasn't writing all of it out.
No, that would have been. This would have been a 10-page doc if instead of 8 if you had written all the Thunder picks. Basically, they have all their own firsts, the next 7, and they can get up to 6 additional first rounders coming from various outside obligations, and can do anything they want. The questions are like, when do you pull the trigger? Basically, because all the same stuff we talk about with Houston of like, you're gonna have to pay J-Dub, you're gonna have to pay Chet. Like you really are not that far away from basically being like a 3 max team or close to it. So you have to consider that it's not just as simple as we'll keep drafting first rounders and just pay them forever. And they're a great team. You could cite the rebounding, you could cite interior defense, you could cite needing a secondary, really for them, just go get another primary creator because they could. But other than that, like, I don't know, do they need to do something? If so, what? And like, I don't know, what level of player does it need to be to justify them kind of getting after it and finally putting some of these assets on the table?
It almost just needs to be someone that has a chance to close for them. Like that has to be if they're going to do something. And I think it still needs to be a shot creator, shot maker, maybe preferably one with size, but just someone, because as of right now, like J-Dub looks overtaxed in the non-SGA minutes. And then in the playoffs, last year he looked overtaxed just playing like as the second option with SGA on the court. And so you want to try and fill that. I'm not chasing that type of an upgrade right now because you might reach a point where you say, we can't play it's like the Pelicans party line. Like we need to see everybody healthy for an extended period of time. Maybe you're never going to get that with Chet Holmgren. I'm more optimistic. We're not at that point yet, but like wait until at least the off season and see how the playoffs unfold before you make that call. But just the lack of information with what you look like when you have one Hartenstein and Holmgren on the court together, but just more extensive availability this year from J-Dub, Shea, and Chet. Like I just can't talk myself into them doing anything. And while you could say like, well, what about doing something more minor for them, like a Cam Johnson? They just don't have throwaway players when it comes to like going to match a Cam Johnson. Even Aaron Wiggins plus Ousmane Dieng made me think, like, I don't know that I want to give up Aaron Wiggins.
Wiggins is good, man. Like Wiggins just keeps showing up in big game, like against the Cavs. He had like that guy's good and on a great contract. Yeah, that's not a throw-in at all.
And that's the problem, because you could also say, well, like if Aaron Wiggins' playing time is not going to be a constant, like shouldn't you? But would Cam Johnson's playing time on this team be a constant? I don't fucking know.
So I think that's right. I think like, because what do you, the question is, if you're trying to change that opinion, is like, what do you lose by just, holding on to this team through the deadline and like assessing after hopefully everybody's healthy and plays together, seeing if you need to make a move over the summer? I guess the only thing you lose is like you're a year closer to having to pay a couple guys. Windows, and then the more broad like concern of, well, windows are short and they're great now, so like anytime you're this good, you should be willing to do whatever it takes to get a little better. Like that's somewhat persuasive to me. But I just think, to frame it from the perspective of that Cleveland game, which was the best game of the year, just awesome across the board, it's like, oh, this exposed, look, man, Cavs just were dunking all over the place. The rebound deficit, look, the Thunder are flawed. It's like the Thunder didn't have their two best defensive players, like, and like their stretch big. Like, I don't feel like you can look at that loss, which was close, and view it as a referendum on like what the Thunder need. It's like, well, yeah, they got two real a starter and a high end rotation guy on the bench. Like, it's not an argument that they need to go out and make a deal. I'm arguing it's a straw man right now, but you get the idea.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, what would be the case or the scenario where it would make sense for them to do anything? It would almost have to be, not only does this player fill our biggest need now, but they don't become superfluous once Chet is back and you're at full strength. And so it's basically, you need a shot creator that plays the three.
It's Kawhi,
right?
Like Kawhi is available, or something, something like at that level.
Like, look at how many contracts they have to send out to get Kawhi.
Yeah. Well, then you're losing Wiggins and Joe and somebody else you probably don't want to lose. But that's the type of player you're talking about, where it's like, this is an ad, no question. Like, this is a for sure ad. He's gonna play all the biggest moments. Like, there's like 10 guys in the league you could add to this team that's true for.
Like, would it have to be like, would OG Anunoby even fit like that? Like, go get OG Anunoby? Is like, well, look at what he makes, and he doesn't provide enough of the shot creation, so no.
Like, what does that? Yeah. That doesn't solve any of their problems, which is insane because he's a great player.
I like throwing money out of the equation. Like, Kawhi Leonard is probably the answer, and so it's this team. This team, and your point about the title windows being fleeting, which we've both made like a few times. They're the exception. Like, them and what Boston did. Remember, everyone wanted Boston to continue trading. Like, when you're set up the way that they are, and even you could probably loop Houston into this. It's just different with Houston because their window's not quite open. Like, they've wedged it open a little bit, and we consider them a contender. But do you consider them one of the, I would say, 4 or 5 most likely teams to win a title? You're putting OKC, Cleveland, Boston in front of them for sure. I think if Dallas is going to be healthy, so it's a combo. But like, those are the teams where they feel like the exceptions to the window rule.
Yeah, a little bit for sure. And the Thunder are really like the exception because there's 2 guys on rookie scale deals are their second and third best player. Like, you got a little while, but yeah, I don't see the guy that's out there that's available.
Mikal?
Who?
Mikal Bridges? Would that? I said, I'm not saying he's available, but I'm like, would that move the Thunder? And if the Knicks were like, well, we're going to move Mikal Bridges for something, like,
I don't know. I think you have the J-Dub problem where it's like, oh, he's a little overtaxed as a second unit leader, like that, right?
Does the two of them combined though result in like because look, the Karl-Anthony Towns without Jalen Brunson minutes when Mikal Bridges is on the court, although they kind of tether JB to Mikal and Karl-Anthony Towns. I don't have the name. Kawhi might be the right answer, but then that's when you get into the money of it all, where it's, well, why would they want to match? And they don't have who's the closest. Is it Isaiah Joe? Someone making more than $3 million? It's Ousmane Dieng, I guess, but like, who's making real money? The mid-end contract? Who do you view to throw away? Like,
you're just choosing between Wiggins and Joe, and like, that's kind of it. Unless you think, oh, well, they just extended Caruso. Like, clearly they don't view him as a throwaway piece.
Do you think that would be worth a consideration if the Nets were willing to do it? So it's Joe and Dieng and then maybe a first, or is that still just like, well, why are we for Johnson? Why are we doing that?
I mean, I would probably think pretty hard about that if I were the Thunder, but it runs into the same problem of like, yeah, you got a very good player who's probably better than the guys you gave up, but like, so he's going to play, 7 more minutes a game than Joe did. I guess maybe when the margins are as slim as they are at the top of the contender list, like that is valuable enough, but
then it's like Joe is the one who like he'll set screens and fly around, and like that's not really Cam Johnson's game.
No, very different players.